It's finally here. We're looking at the beginning of the Jujutsu Kaisen Shibuya arc. I know technically we've got a few episodes till we're really into that arc, but all the setup and everything starts now. So I think it would be a good idea if we perhaps covered the top 5 things that you need to know before you start this series. And we're going to go over some basic things and some actually really important items that you may or may not have forgotten or maybe didn't quite realize. But before we begin, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel so you can always get more anime content from me. All right, let's get started. Let's go ahead and start this off with a doozy. So, in case you didn't remember, and I couldn't blame you for not remembering because it's been a while since we covered it, Jujutsu Kaisen's Shibuya arc is going to have a lot of twists and turns, but one of the most important is the bad guys at least think they have a plan to deal with Satoru Gojo. Now, how effective this plan is going to be is going to vary a lot depending on certain factors, and depending if you've read the manga or not, you know how well that's going to go. But we've certainly done some good establishment with this. We are already aware that they are in possession of the cursed item Prison Realm, which they think can seal him away. That was established in the first season. We are also aware now, thanks to hidden inventory, that Gojo is extremely powerful, but not invincible. So the setup for this arc is pretty well in place, but on the other hand, we are well aware that Gojo is the strongest sorcerer, bar none. And because of that, we know that he's going to put up a pretty good fight, and it's going to be an excellent fight in this season. But it is important to keep in mind that because it is essentially Gato going into a fight against Gojo, he has a plan, and this plan is going to be very clever. And last time, his plan nearly worked, so we'll see this time if it does. Another thing that you might have forgotten if you haven't kept this series on constant repeat, like some people have, is that technically our 3 main characters have all unlocked significant power ups. Most importantly, Yuji has learned how to use, at least in principle, the Black Flash, although you can't use that on command. Nobara has also attained use of the Black Flash, which is incredibly important for her character. And now Megami has his domain expansion. This will be very vital going forward in this season and this arc because all 3 of these characters, being our main leads, are going to be put through quite a lot. And knowing that they have essentially started to unlock their maximum potential is going to be very, very important. Now, obviously, we're going to have to see them go even farther in this season because it's an anime and there's never a time that a character isn't supposed to be pushing past their limits. But it is, in principle, important to remember that they have actually already broken not only the expectations of what an average sorcerer would be able to do, but especially ones of their age bracket. So going into the season, they're kind of already a step above a lot of people. Another important thing to keep in mind is the fact that there are other elements being in play here more than just people, although we'll get to people that are in play here in a second. Something that's important to keep in mind is that a number of cursed items were actually stolen from Jujutsu High in the first season. Most importantly, 6 of Riem and Sukuna's fingers, and the Cursed Womb's death paintings. Now, obviously, we already know what happened to 2 of the Cursed Womb death paintings as of first season because, unfortunately, Nobara and Yuji kind of killed them. But that's okay in a way because they needed to. It's morally ambiguous, but they were in a situation and they dealt with it. Unfortunately, that's going to have some serious consequences because one death painting is still unaccounted for, and that is Choso. And he's kind of the strongest one. If you paid special attention in the trailer that we got that featured the new opening, which sounded awesome, you're pretty much aware that he has one of the stronger abilities in the whole of the series. Um, with that in mind, it's also important not to forget about the fingers. They're going to play an important role this series, and you have to remember that they're in play because they are going to come up. Since we're talking about the people that are actually going to be here, let's go ahead and go over everyone. Everyone who is featured in the series up to this point is going to get some kind of role. There's only really one character who I can think of that doesn't make their appearance quite yet, but needless to say, if they have had any kind of prominent role up to this point in time, they are going to get to show up. That's a good thing. We get to see a lot of characters get to spring into action here, and technically, with Jujutsu Kaisen Zero as a movie adaptation, you got to see a little bit more of this. Nanami and Mei Mei in particular got a bit more attention in that film, but this was really the arc the first time manga readers got to see what they could do. We also get to see what the head of the Zenin clan can do here. He's one of the sorcerers that's deployed. Every manager is essentially brought out and deployed as supports for the sorcerers, so there's some tension around that. Essentially, anyone who's kind of been featured in any significant way, like I said, perhaps except for one, maybe two, all really get a moment in this series. And that does also mean that there are a lot of people in the risk factor. I mean, you're taking into account that Jujutsu High Tokyo will be there, Jujutsu High Kyoto will be there, a number of the more independent sorcerers, so like Nanami and Mei Mei are going to be there. It's kind of this situation forces them to call in everyone, and while that is awesome, it's also going to be kind of stressful in some areas.
Now, the last thing that I'm going to want to remind everyone about is the fact that Yuji and Mahito are rivals. And that kind of makes sense because a big part of this coming season is going to be their first official clash since the Versus Mahito arc. Now, it's kind of funny that a lot of people might forget these two characters were rivals because in the manga it hasn't come up in a very long time. And if you're an anime only, you haven't actually seen them square off since the Versus Mahito arc when he killed Junpei and kind of really tried to scar Yuji. It's going to be interesting. This arc will force both characters to evolve yet again, and we're going to see Yuji go through some of the biggest changes that he's undergone in the total of the series. Mahito will also get to be even more powerful. Um, the nature of this fight is very interesting because the way that it was talked about originally versus how they might adapt it here is going to be very interesting. There are some things that we didn't know in the manga at the time that the animators will now have full awareness of, and how they're going to choose to implement that will be really interesting to see. We'll probably do breakdowns on that as it happens, but needless to say, this is going to be one of the bigger payoffs in the whole of the arc. And there it is, the top 5 things that you need to be aware of before starting the Shibuya Incident arc for Jujutsu Kaisen. Go ahead and let me know if you think that I covered some of the more important elements in this if you're a manga reader. And if you're anime only, let me know if you're excited for this arc, like what you really think is going to happen here. I'll talk to you all in the next episode.